Welcome to Needham School Spotlight. I'm Dan Goody-Kanst, Superintendent of Schools. Joining me today are several folks who have been involved in the Needham High School feasibility study. I want to welcome Barry Kaufman, Nathan Samani, Principal Aaron Seacott, and Chair of the Permanent Public Building Committee, George Kent. Thank you all for being here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, the Needham High School classroom expansion feasibility study has been ongoing for this past year, but there's actually more context and more history. And George, I was wondering if you could share with us what is this project all about? When did it begin, and where are we?
Well, for a number of years, there's been a real need, as seen by the people closest to the high school, for additional classroom space and additional facility space at the high school. Prior to this, we tried to explain what the need was. I don't think that was sufficiently done at the time a few years ago to convince town meeting that we should move ahead with a project. We did have a project in mind, but since then we've been asked to go back and do an additional feasibility study, which we've essentially just completed. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, the process is that the Permanent Public Building Committee develops a feasibility study with the appropriate professionals, including the architect, and that is based on whatever the needs are. In this particular case, we needed to help develop what the needs were, what the real needs were for the high school going forward. And so this feasibility study took on the element of helping to develop what the need was, as well as trying to identify what the options were that would be available for the town as we move forward.
Now, the high school just came off of a cafeteria expansion project, and the Permanent Public Building Committee was involved in that design and implementation, which I think went very well and really speaks to the need for additional space at Needham High School.
That's correct, and that project was finished on time and under budget by about 10%, and the town should be aware of that we try to do these projects all on time and under budget. And that additional money that was not spent, it will be rescinded back to the town, as it has been typically on most of our projects.
Well, and it, besides being an incredibly well-managed project, it's providing much-needed space at Needham High School. You know, Nathan, I'm going to jump into this with you right now. You are the student representative on the feasibility study work group. So what's that experience been all about, and why this particular this study? Is it crowded at Needham High School?
Definitely. I think working on this study has been an interesting experience because it's been cool to be able to give life to some of the numbers, because in some of the meetings that we had, we would look at class averages and utilization rates, and it was easy to kind of get lost in a large set of numbers, but it's been cool to actually give some perspective as to what those numbers mean for students and their experiences here, because it's definitely busy here, but projects like the cafeteria expansion give more room to students to be comfortable and do everything the way they should.
I was in the cafeteria the other day, and I noticed that, I forget which lunch it was, but the expansion was filled. The main original cafeteria was filled, and it reminded me, where did we put everybody before we did this? But students are taking advantage of the expanded cafeteria.
Definitely.
Is that correct?
I haven't had to take a knee at lunch thus far.
Okay. Okay.
I'm very happy.
Well, that's good to know. Should point out that the designer that's working with us, Doran Whittier, is the same designer that's working on the new elementary school project on Central Avenue. And you said something, George, that really I think is very true, that we've been studying this for over 4 years, actually. But this new look from Doran Whittier has really provided a robust set of numbers and facts and analysis that we didn't have before. Is that fair to say?
I think that's correct, yes. And I think town meeting really needs to see that work has been done. And it's not just the school department and the principal asking for more classroom space, but that there's a real need for that classroom space. They saw that in the cafeteria when we said not only do we not have enough space, but we violate the fire codes. They immediately got behind the project and and help to defend it. I think in this particular case, we need to present the data to them at town meeting that identifies to them what the real need is, and that we're not asking for anything beyond what the needs are.
Well, Aaron, let's talk about the need. I'm thinking about a couple of things. One, enrollment, because that really drives where we're at, and then the challenges associated with enrollment. So take us through a little bit. You know, we opened this new high school less than 10 years ago, and here we are looking for more space. What is that story? What's happening?
Well, as Nathan said, the numbers are a big part of the conversation. They're not the most important part, but we can start there. The building was designed for about 1,450 students. This year we're at just about 1,660, so clearly well over the original design. And in the mid-2020s, we're going to be up over 1,800. So we are crowded. There's no doubt about it. And as George said, this study has been really nice to be able to determine beyond just that sense of, wow, we're tight in here, what does that really mean? What are the actual needs that we have? What we've done prior to this study is just tried to adjust any space we possibly can and turn it into instructional space. So in the original design of the building, there was a fair amount of collaboration space for teachers and collaboration space for students and teachers. Nearly all of that has been transitioned into classroom teaching space. So we've really tried to do everything we possibly can to maximize the space for students to learn. It's been at the cost of, I think, the comfort of some of the adults and the opportunity to collaborate and interact for some of the adults, but we've made it work. We're at a point now where it's really hard to even make that work, and the options we have ahead of us, if we aren't going to expand at all, is to really put lots of kids in classes. We have smaller class sizes compared to some of the Massachusetts state kind of standards, so we're even limited in that regard, but we certainly could just keep trying to pack kids in classes. That's an option, not one that we're excited about.
Or we could impact program.
Or
and
the
maybe
other
cut back on
the other alternative is we can offer fewer options for our students to take and limit the flexibility they have and the control over their own learning and their own experience. And again, that's not something that I would ever advocate for. I don't think that's what the community is looking for with the Needham High experience, and we're hoping to be able to protect those programs.
I think, if I have this correct, and again, this is something we've been working on for 4 years, and town meeting, by the way, has been quite responsive. Several years ago, and Barry, I think you'll remember this, that town meeting appropriated money to redesign some interior spaces. The language lab was dismantled. Actually, most of your computer labs have been dismantled and turned into classroom spaces. Some storage rooms have been turned into classroom space. We're kind of at a point now where there's really not much else to do without adding some space. Nathan, I want you to talk a little bit about what that space crunch has meant for students and how it's impacted them. But Barry, maybe first of all, how did you get involved in this project? Are you a town meeting member of the finance committee? How did that work for you?
As one of the 9 finance committee members, one of my roles is as a liaison to the school committee. So, as you know, Dan, we spent a fair amount of time prior to the presentation of the budgets going through the school department budget and coming up with an agreed upon final budget for an operating budget for the school department. And when this project, when the study was proposed, I think we wanted some representation early on to better understand how the study was going to take hold and making sure that everybody understood the financial implications of whatever decisions were going to be made. The town does a very good job of planning, and there is a long-term capital plan, and there has been a line item for this project in the capital plan earmarked. I think the numbers that have come out from some of the options are above that number, so there'll be some have to be some decisions that will be made, but that's ultimately town meeting's decision to make as all the facts get presented to them. And I think just making sure that everybody all through the process sort of understood what the cost, the implications of the cost of the different projects would have for the town as a whole, given a lot of the other projects that we all know are going to be needed over the upcoming years.
Well, the town is not sitting still. There's a lot going on, and I want to get back to that in a moment. You are on the Finance Committee, numbers guy sitting next to the student, and I want to ask about your experiences in a moment. But from that numbers point of view, do you feel that the conversations you've participated in, the analysis that the designer's been done, has it been sufficient? Has it provided good information?
Actually, I think Dore and Whittier did a fantastic job. They really, I think, did a very thorough and detailed analysis of exactly how the building's being used, exactly how every room in the building's being used, and the impact on the different programs. And I think certainly, having seen what the presentation was in the prior year that didn't pass town meeting, I think the information that is available now is far more compelling. And I think the case being made for the need is significant. Now, we obviously, it'll be town meeting's decision to approve or not to approve, and we haven't even, as a finance committee, come to a final vote on our recommendation. But having participated in the process, and most people on the Finance Committee have seen the presentation that Dore and Whittier put together, and I think as a group we all feel pretty comfortable that the analysis that was done was very well done and very well thought out. And the options that were presented, there are a number of options that I think make a lot of sense, assuming that that the numbers can be made to work ultimately.
Make the financing work. And Nathan, just real quickly, so how has this, you're a senior, you've been here 4 years, you've watched enrollment grow. What are some of the things that students experience as a result of some of the challenges?
I think that, well, one of the things that I see most common every day that I have my English class specifically, I think, is around 28 students. It's an accelerated English 12 class. But that classroom specifically is really problematic to simply walk into because it's so packed in that I've told a story of I turn around sometimes and my backpack will knock over someone's laptop on their desk. There's really kind of not room for people to get work done, to breathe on their own. But I think another way that it's been really impactful for students, and I've talked to other kids about this as well, but a lot of times teachers are jumping in between classrooms because the classrooms are being utilized during so much of the day. And so some of my teachers, for example, my chem teacher last year didn't exactly have a home base where kids could go to after school or where he would be during his prep period. And so one day when I missed a lab for a field trip I was on and I had to come in and make up that lab, it was extremely difficult to find a time that the room was open because it was being used so much. And it was difficult to find him after school because I didn't know what room he was going to be in what day. So I think it's definitely posed a bunch of challenges to me and to other students as far as getting the best educational experience.
And I think our teachers and our students, supported by the administration, really do a great job and provide good programming, excellent programming for our students. And I don't think that has been jeopardized, but I think we're getting to a point where it will be impacted. And some of the things that we pride ourselves in just can't happen when there's that lack of space and elbow room and collaboration space to think differently and to work differently.
Well, Dan, if I can jump in real quickly, I would agree with you that we're not at a point where we've had programming impacted. I think the experience has been impacted, and Nathan's talking about some key areas. I would also highlight that as a teacher is moving from one room to another, that teacher is coming into a space and needing to get the lesson plans situated, maybe adjust the classroom, and isn't able to be at the door greeting students as they're coming in. So we're impacting the kind of community that we can create, and even just the quick check-ins. As Nathan is coming in and he just came from a bad math test or something, hey, what's going on, Nathan? We can have that brief conversation. Or at the end of class, hey, Mr. Seacott, I didn't quite understand that. Can I ask a quick question? As opposed to the many situations where we have now where those teachers are packing up and needing to get to a new space and someone else is coming in.
I think that's a great point, and that's a great clarification that the student experience is being impacted negatively by the lack of space. Well, I want to get to the feasibility's conclusions because without going through all of the options, there were 5 options, I believe. And I think a sixth one is a do-nothing option, perhaps. But the option that seems to have gained some traction and actually was voted on by the building committee and the school committee is option F. Aaron and George, take us through what exactly is, what's option F? What is that, what's the big picture there? What does that look like?
Well, I think that before I mention option F, I really should mention the fact that this building virtually has no free space. It truly doesn't. And the options that we looked at included looking at disrupting existing space within the building that's fully utilized. And so what that did was it presented us with some options. We did that, and we said we'll disrupt, we'll see what we can do, even though there is no real good space to use, and look at what the results of those are. So we did look at a lot of different options, and I think it behooves us to do that. It forced us outside the building, just as the cafeteria expansion forced us outside the building, outside the footprint of the original building. And in essence, the only acceptable option that we found that really made sense for the project was an option that moved the footprint outside of the existing building to the space at the rear of the building, at the Webster Street side of the building, just as the cafeteria expansion did, but on the other side of the entrance to that building.
So in the same general area, opposite the cafeteria expansion on the Webster Street side.
That's correct.
And what would Aaron, what would be included in that expansion at this point?
So in the design right now, the first floor area would be an updated and relocated main office. I'll admit, as the principal, it's a little strange to have my office tucked away in the second floor, so it would be nice to have it be a little bit more central. And then above that, on the two floors, would be 5 classrooms on each floor of slightly varying sizes to give us more flexibility with how we're able to accommodate our students in the programming that we have. So we'd be gaining the 10 classrooms between the 2 floors and then additional office space. And with my office now moving downstairs, we can convert that into instructional space as well. Probably targeting some of our specialized programmings that we have that can use the already subdivided space that the main office is, so we wouldn't need to invest any more in reconfiguring the internal space.
And so the classroom space would be for some of your core subjects, math, special education, English, social studies, science, world language, and really kind of general purpose classroom space, and some space, some elbow room for collaboration.
Correct.
Space. Describe what that will be all about, or what that will be for.
The collaboration space?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that has come through very clearly in this study is the recognition by students and staff that there really isn't a lot of opportunity for students to get together outside of the classroom space, to have conversations around assignments, to touch base with each other on what particular project. We have tried to create some of those spaces in the main lobby and a few different areas within the hallways, but as we have more students, those spaces are in demand more frequently. So one of the things that has come up through this feasibility study is, when possible, if we can create collaboration space, we're going to try and do so. The goal was never to invest in more collaboration space. It was really to creatively use the spaces around the classroom space that are being designed. And right now, with the study that we have and with this option, it does look like we'll be able to gain some collaboration space for students around the classrooms.
And if I could just add one thing in that regard, having come out of the university environment where so many things are done on a project basis, the high school really needs to have projects that exist, and they do have projects that exist, but they also have to have a space where students can get together to discuss those projects and to work on those projects. And it's not always supposed to be that they go to someone's house to do that. Very often the most convenient place to do that is within the school building, maybe after school hours or during free time that they might have. So as you look forward to the next 20, 30, 40 years, it's becoming more of a project-based education for a lot of students, and that translates into being better prepared for college experiences where so many things are project-based.
And to make sure that you have the flexibility in the building to respond to some of those program changes.
That's correct.
Barry, you mentioned that there's a cost being carried in the capital plan. I believe it was around $7 million for this
Yes.
project. The reality that, and these are preliminary estimates. They're not doing this for you, George. They're preliminary estimates. They're not the final word. But right now, it looks like the cost of this project could be anywhere between $11 to $12 million. And that's not in the capital plan right now. So that's something town meeting has to wrestle with, but wrestle with a variety of other projects. So
Correct. And this year's town meeting, there's some one other big project that's on the warrant is for a potential new pool at Rosemary. Part of a big portion of which is being proposed to be paid for with CPA money, Community Preservation Act money. But there is an element for the office building that is being proposed. The new building is being proposed that to be partly funded by the town. There's some a lot of some projects related around the DPW, and ultimately George is much more familiar with that project than I am. But in any given year, there are a number of obviously projects, and obviously we know that there are upcoming projects in future years, whether it's this Memorial Park building that is on the docket, and other big, we're going through a big study for a new fire and police buildings, which will get done over the next few years. So all of this has to be balanced. We have guidelines that we've tried to stay within in terms of how much debt we're willing to take on. They are guidelines, and again, as a finance committee member, we don't have any authority. We just make recommendations and just make one. And our job is really to make town meeting aware of the implications of doing this project, or one project versus another project. Sometimes that may mean that projects may get delayed a year or two, or could get funded over a couple of years, or will utilize free cash that gets developed. We do generate free cash although it's not 100% predictable. Every year there is a meaningful amount of free cash that gets allocated for various purposes. So it's it can, we'll ultimately have to, what town meeting will have to determine is how high a priority this project is, and whether this should get financed potentially ahead of other projects.
And then the decisions would be, how can we take care of these other projects
Correct.
in the queue, and what
Correct.
makes most sense? Because they're very real needs that exist
They're all
in town.
exactly.
I want to make sure I understand that.
George, do you want to?
I wanted to clarify one point. I don't want to give the impression that we're asking for the money for this project.
Right. I
was just gonna say,
Now, the article on town meeting floor will be for approximately $925,000.
And what would that be for?
I
And that will be
apologize, that's a
for
good point.
developing the details of the design to get us to a cost that is much more representative, a much more accurate representation of what the selected option will be. And that will be available to us for the November town meeting. So the vote for the actual project and the expenditure for that will be at November town meeting.
So for now, this May town meeting will be asked to talk about providing design funds to take
Correct.
us to the next step.
That's correct.
in
But the
project.
implication is, if this project isn't acceptable, then why vote for the
Right.
design funds now? So it's not a given that it would be an acceptable project in November, but I think people are looking at it that way, and I think we have to look at it that way. We're good planners in
Right.
Needham, but we also need to think about, if we do approve this, then we're essentially approving the concept of this, and therefore you've got to find the place in the budget to provide the funding for this project when it does come before them a few months from now.
And if ultimately the town can finance the design, and town meeting in the fall could finance construction dollars, we're looking at a project that we begin perhaps doing some work at the high school within the next year and a half or so to help address as we reach the 1,800 student threshold.
The proper work has been done to really articulate and identify the need. It's much more clear now, I think, than it was originally, what the need is, why there is a need, what the implications are if we do nothing, and the compromises that ultimately have to be made. And I do think, if I've lived in Needham almost 30 years, this town has been extremely supportive generally of the schools, and I think we're very fortunate. It is a very well-managed town and prudently managed. I don't think we go too far overboard on any one project. But I do think at least the case has been made fairly well for for the need. And the population, the numbers, we do every year. There's an independent group that does projections for the school population. At least for the high school, that's a much more accurate, if I use the term a little loosely, but just based on the population, we know what is in K
That
through
exists,
8
right,
that already
right.
exists, that's likely to come. So the 1,800 number is we can say with meaningful comfort that that's likely to happen. And based on that, I think it's clear from the studies and the utilization of the school today that you would have to start making some significant compromises in programming if and when we get to that point, if nothing is done.
And I think you said the community has been immensely supportive of the schools in both operational, the budget, and capital planning. And so we want to make sure that we're thoughtfully using the dollars that the community has been so generous to provide. Maytown meeting will entertain, as you suggested, George, an article to look for design funds, and if that's successful, then the Permanent Public Building Committee will work with the designer and the high school to take it to the next level with more work to come. And it sounds like a thoughtful project. It sounds like your work, all of you involved in it, really provided some of the data and analysis that was necessary, supported by the designer. I would encourage folks, town meeting members, community members, to go to the Needham Public Schools website for additional information on the Needham High School feasibility. And we'll stay tuned and see what happens. In the meantime, Nathan, good luck senior year. Thank you for participating in this and providing a student voice to the project. Barry, George, and Aaron, thanks very much for your work with the high school classroom feasibility study. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Dan.